Hey everyone, Samantha here. Welcome to Trans IRL. Joining me tonight is Thomas. And some of the people watching may have heard, but we do have a big announcement here tonight. Thomas is joining me as a host of Trans IRL. So Thomas, on behalf of Addison and myself, we're so glad to have you here. Welcome.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. It is so exciting to join you both and to be a co-host on the show. I can't wait to see what we do together.
We're thrilled to have you. So since starting Trans IRL, we've wanted to create a show that is inclusive, respectful, and sensitive to all individuals in the transgender community. And part of that is understanding where we excel and where we still have opportunity to do things better. I've enjoyed hosting the show solo, but I'm a single voice and my own experiences are limited to how I've transitioned as a trans woman. Thomas has made a name for himself on Instagram, openly and honestly sharing a story as a trans man, and he provides some needed perspective to the show. We are super happy to have him join here with us tonight and going forward.
I am so excited to join you, and I just can't say it enough. I mean, I'm like really excited. But besides joining the program, this episode also marks two other important milestones for the show. We're excited to announce that our YouTube channel has passed 1,000 subscribers. As a reminder to people new to the show, our previous episodes are archived on our channel, and if you subscribe, you will receive a notification when the show is live, and you'll be able to participate in our live chat during the show. Our Instagram page, Trans IRL, also had a milestone this week as it passed 2,000 followers. Instagram is the best way to submit questions to the show and to contact us if you have an idea for an episode. Tonight, we're also live streaming on our Facebook page, Trans IRL Show, and we are able to take questions from the live chat there as well. Our followers and subscribers are what make this show possible. Being able to take viewer questions and input allows us to produce an amazing live show each week.
Now, as always, we have Addison in the Trans IRL control room, and she'll be running things behind the scenes for us tonight. Addison's going to be monitoring the chats on both YouTube and Facebook, and we'll check in with her later in the episode to see if there are any questions that have been submitted. Joining Addison in the studio this week is Victoria, and Victoria is helping with something new we are trying tonight, which is live call-ins. So if something sounds interesting on the episode tonight and you'd like to share some of your perspective, you can actually call Victoria using the Skype handle on our YouTube page description, our video description there. And you'll have a quick chat with her, and we'll try to work you into the conversation. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into tonight's show.
All right, tonight we'll be talking about a topic near and dear to all of our hearts here at Trans IRL, and that is self-care, mental, physical, and emotional self-care.
Yeah, transitioning can so easily overwhelm our minds, our bodies, and our hearts, consuming our focus and leaving little energy for anything or anyone else. So it's really important that we identify ways to care for ourselves in all aspects of our lives.
Yeah, I know I have certainly experienced this in my own transition, actively participating in my own forms of self-care, like cuddling with my cats, fitness, or simply just taking care of my body, even when it's causing me dysphoria, and sometimes especially when it's causing me dysphoria. That's all helped me keep grounded and has opened up my time and my energy for other areas of my life.
So tonight's guest has her own experience approaches to self-care and self-love, and we are really excited to talk to her about her personal strategies for keeping it all together. At this point, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Erica Grace to the show. Hi, Erica.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight. It's great to have you here. Would you like to go ahead and take a few moments and just sort of introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Trying to think of where to start. I am 29 years old. I live in Philadelphia. I'm born and raised in New Jersey, and I went to the University of Delaware. I started in 2007 there, graduated in 2011, got my master's in 2012, and I've been in Philadelphia from 2012 onwards. I didn't come to terms with my gender identity. I didn't start transitioning until age 27, and like I said, I'm 29 now, so I've been been moving through this stage of my life for the past little over a year now.
All right. So we'll go ahead and jump into our topic for tonight, which is self-care and self-love. And we had a chance to talk a little bit before tonight's episode and kind of went over some things that you do in your life to, work through some of those tougher points in transition. And something that really caught my attention was the use of a tool you call your self-journal.
Yeah, that was something that my company had actually given each of its employees, well, not each of them. There's a certain program my company does for employees that have been with the firm for over 2.5 years, and that's called their Mastery Summit. And it's basically just deeper focused time for, again, employees who have been there long enough and want to, help them to invest in their personal and professional development. So this self-care journal, it's the best self journal or the self journal. I have my copy right here. It is designed to be utilized on a 3-month basis. So the goal being, in 3 months you work through this journal, and the next 3 months you could either, buy a new one or just, go through and complete the steps for another 3 months of your life, with the goal being to, the purpose being to pick 3 goals in your life and see if you can accomplish them in 3 months. And if not, to break down a larger goal and see how much of that you can do in 3 months. So it just helps you break out those goals into weekly checkpoints, daily checkpoints. And my absolute favorite part of the journal is when it asks you to write down, for every day, when you wake up, it says write down 3 things you're grateful for. And when you go to sleep, write down 3 things you're grateful for every morning, every evening. And I just think it's such a wonderfully positive tool to start and end your day by feeling, looking for things that are grateful or feeling grateful for certain things. So I can get into more specifics if you care to hear them, or if you want to know my particular goals.
Yeah, so I was curious, you mentioned, you said you were using it for work, but have you started using this primarily for your transition related goals as well? Or how have you used that tool?
I had obtained it from work, but I would say, like, for the 3 goals that I initially established back in 2017, I think is when I was primarily using this. 2 of my goals were more personal related. I would say transition related. That was the very beginning of my transition. So I was very heavily focused on what to do next in my life. And one of my 3 goals was work related. So I actually dug this back up because I've fallen out of habit of using this ritualistically as I had been at this point in my life. But when I was using this, I felt most on top of, I'd say, every aspect of my life, personally, professionally. I just felt like I could do anything. And, preparing for this show made me realize, like, that I really need to start incorporating these type of tools back into my life. But just reading back, fall of 2017 was the beginning of my transition. I started hormones in October 2017. And I was, trying to work on laser, trying to work on my voice, trying to work on coming out, both personally, professionally. And it just got to be so incredibly overwhelming that I needed, when I got this tool from my employer, it was just a perfect way to help me break down all of these things into manageable goals. So first goal was to begin my transition and set myself up for long-term success. Second goal was to improve my health mentally and physically to ensure that I can live my life to the fullest. And the third goal was to strive to be a better team leader and client-serving professional, because I'm an accountant, like client-serving professional. So for each of those main 3 goals, you break them into 3 progress goals, which are little stepping stones. And for each of those 3 progress goals, you list 3 actions or tasks that you can do on a daily, weekly, or just semi-frequent basis to just keep building blocks to just slowly work your way up towards those goals. So, utilizing this tool, I was able to, in a 3-month span from October till December 2017, come out in person to 40 to 50 people in my life, come out at work. I was able to start my voice training sessions. I was able to start hormones. I was able to train for a half marathon. It was just, the amount of things I was doing at that point in my life was just absolutely incredible. And, I owe it largely in part to just the positivity and the organization that this journal provided me.
And that's so huge, to have organization in transition. I know for me, when I first started out, I didn't use an official journal like this, but I actually sat down with Laura and very early in transition, and we started kind of trying to build a timeline, right? Because when you look at transition as a whole, right, this is where you start and this is where you end. That's a very daunting it's a very daunting image, right? It's so hard to see the end, but when you sit down and, like you said with your self journal there, you start breaking it down, and then you break down those tasks into subtasks. Those smaller steps become a lot easier to knock out versus just trying to hop over the mountain in a single leap. And I know for me that being able to see that, being able to understand, like, what do I need to do now? What do I need to do next month? What's going to happen in 6 months? That really helped me feel more confident in my own transition. And it's not to say that was ever set in stone, right? There's always an opportunity to go back and adjust a schedule or a portion of your transition. But just to know that, well, I know I have to get through these tasks, definitely helped me have a much better mindset going into this, and helped me feel less afraid of what the future was going to bring. Because once I could look at a piece of paper or a spreadsheet and say, well, I know this is coming, and now I can prepare for it, for me personally, that was hugely beneficial in my own transition.
Yeah, I would agree completely. And, it's my mind very much works that way. I naturally look to break things down, organize them, and I'm an accountant. So Excel is not just a work tool for me. It's like a life organizational tool. It's weirdly a passion for me. For people whose minds don't normally work like that. And, my brother, for example, his mind doesn't normally work like that. Or for other people who I would say are more right brain dominant, this tool can be a great visualization technique, a great way to kind of, emotionally connect with the logistical steps and tasks that you need to accomplish in your life. So I think it's like a nice mix of both the left brain, right brain, and just, helping you from all aspects, really just try to accomplish what you need to do. It certainly helped me.
I think that just writing in general is a great therapy, right? To actually sit down and write down what happened in your day, to capture, the what went wells and where are the opportunities for tomorrow. I know that for me personally, my journal is sort of Instagram every day when I do my post, right? I sort of use that to decompress what happened in the previous day, or examine maybe something that's been bothering me, or maybe work through a dysphoric moment or something like that. And it's sort of a kill two birds with one stone, because not only does it allow me the chance to write out what I'm working through, but it also allows me to get feedback from other individuals, a lot of who are in the same situation that I'm in. So for me, my journaling is very public and forward facing, but it's also been very effective in allowing me to work through some of those day-to-day issues as well.
Yep. My approach to my Instagram page is the exact same way. I find it funny that when I try to sit down, when I first went to therapy and, years passed, or even, just when I most recently started going to therapy, we discussed journaling and how healthy that is. And I could never sit down and write in a journal, or I could never just sit down and type in a Word document on my computer. It just, I don't know. For me particularly, it felt odd to be just writing by myself, but it's strangely easy to just be able to write up what's going on in my brain and what's going on in my day and just share that with thousands of individuals. I don't quite understand how that makes any sense, but I find it to be easier to get my thoughts down on my Instagram page than I do just when it's kept personally. Even something as simple as today, like I obviously shared talking about this self-care episode and how excited I am, but then I ended up adding a second post later on today, because I was walking past this one hotel, which happened to be the first hotel that I would get dressed up in and present NFEM, present female around the city. And it was crazy thinking about how alone I felt then, in that building, and how unsure I felt. And now just walking past it, going from, I'm serving in a jury duty right now, but going from City Hall to grab lunch, like just how nonchalantly I walk past that, as I am right now this day. And it's remarkable. So to be able to share thoughts like that and realize that I was so alone back then and I couldn't feel any less alone right now. It's pretty remarkable to be able to share that with people.
I agree wholeheartedly. Not only is it sharing with other people, but it helps you kind of process the past and where you are today. And I am curious, Thomas, what your opinion is on journaling and sharing your story as well.
I was just nodding my head furiously when you're talking about Instagram journaling. That's like my whole life. And I think you're so not alone, Erica, in the feelings of, I too have never been able to get myself to just sit down and like physically write in like a journal with like pen and paper. I've just never been able to do it. And my therapist actually suggested that I start my Instagram before I came out as a way to explore my masculinity and really, share that with someone, even if I didn't know who it was, to receive that kind of online affirmation, even, from someone I've never met before, really changed the game for me. And to be able to continue to do that and to share with people and to build a community has just been, the cornerstone of, not only like self-care, but my transition in general, just all of it. So it's been hugely impactful. Something I found really interesting that you were talking about, Erica, when you were talking about the journal, was this sort of three lists of like what you're grateful for in the morning and in the evening. I think that's really, really cool, because I think we can probably all relate on some level, especially in transitioning. It can be so easy to get focused on the negatives and all the things that we're hoping to change and work on, and how our bodies just don't feel right. And you just go down this rabbit hole of negativity so easily. And so I'm wondering for you, how would you describe the impact of having to really intentionally list out, gratitudes like that, especially while you're working towards your transition?
That's a very good question. I feel like, especially in the early stages of transitioning, when it's very easy to feel frustrated. And I very much remember feeling that frustration in the beginning and the impatience, wanting to be in a place where I wasn't. And, I like to control the things I can, and I try and let go of the things I can't. So to process that was difficult, that once you start hormones, the only thing you can do is just keep taking them and wait. It's very frustrating. There would be days where like it would be very easy to find something grateful for. I came out to this person today, or, I ran this number of miles today. The days where it was difficult, sometimes it would just be something as simple as, I made my bed and I made myself breakfast. That's something in the morning to feel grateful for. Or, I'm just looking back at it's really interesting, digging up this journal for this episode. I'm rereading like a year and a half back in my life, and it's pretty amazing. Oh, this was October 5th of 2017. I was grateful for my job, family and friends, very easy ones. But the third thing was wearing girl PJ pants. I don't know if it was yoga pants. I don't know if they had some sort of pattern, but that, like, I woke up in the morning and like I was wearing female PJ pants, and it was something as simple as that. It really can be, those little things. It doesn't have to be something incredible, something monumental. It can just be the fact that you did something that you didn't think you were going to do that day. Yeah.
That's really amazing. Yeah.
Go ahead, Thomas, with our next question here.
Yeah, so why don't we expand the conversation out a little bit? I know one of my main forms of ongoing self-care has been my fitness routine and actually getting active with my body. And honestly, when I first came out and really started presenting male, I never really had much of a steady fitness routine before then. And I think that had a lot to do with me really not knowing how to approach my body and kind of work with it or want to even really be around it in a physical sense. And, you know, starting a fitness routine was really life-changing for me in that form of connection throughout my transition to my body and in what it can do and how I can see it grow and change and do things that I never thought I would be able to do. So I'm wondering, Erica, if there are any ways that you enjoy connecting with your body through some form of fitness.
Yeah, lately I've been getting back into yoga. I found yoga to be the number one, both physical and mental boosts for myself, especially early stages of transitioning. I'll speak to that just because I feel like that was an extremely pivotal and important point in my life, and where I felt like I was very on top of this. And you know, before I transitioned, before I started HRT, I was maybe 30 pounds heavier than I am now. And I really wanted to get down to, I wanted to lose 30 pounds basically. So I think in that picture, it was like August of 2017. It was when I decided, okay, you know, you need to lose a little weight. Well, some people would say I didn't need to, but I had wanted to. So I started just running, and I made a goal to myself that if you can't lose 30 pounds by the time you start to transition, you know, if you can't commit to that, then how are you going to commit to everything else that comes with it? And that kind of mindset may not work for everybody. For me particularly, it worked. I was about to take on something incredibly important, and I really wanted to make sure that I could do this one step. And for those that don't know, scientifically, testosterone makes it easier to burn fat than estrogen does. So while I still, at that point in my life, had a testosterone dominant body, I wanted to take advantage of it, you know, use it before I lost it, I guess. So I just started running, and I wasn't particularly training for anything. I would just run maybe 3-4 times a week. And you know, by the time November hit, I think that was the second picture you saw in the yoga pants, I had gotten down to my goal weight, or maybe it was even October, but November was the month of the half marathon. And I realized that a month before the half marathon was, in just one of my regular runs to lose weight, I had already run 13.1 miles. So I was like, okay, I may as well just sign up for the half then if I already did this. And you know, that's where you see the next picture with me holding the little bell. The medals for the half marathon here were these little jingly Liberty bells, which, yes, they did make a noise, which is really cool until you're at the finish line and there's thousands of other people around you that also have those bells. Funny story about that day. My phone had died, which, if you know me, you know my phone is always dead. My phone had died and I couldn't call an Uber. I don't know. Luckily I had $20 on me. So I had to walk 30 minutes after completing a half marathon to find a cab that would drive me home. Basically, it was a nightmare. And another thing I did, just moving on, another thing I did was yoga, which at that same point in my life, in addition to running, I was practicing yoga. And I started the Yoga with Adrienne 30 Days of Yoga series, which, in addition to just helping, you know, lean me out, tone me, you know, physically make me feel better, it was just a great way to get in touch with my inner spiritual self, which I'd never had. I never had a sense of spirituality before. So to kind of develop that and foster that was pretty important to me. And, you know, I think in one of the first episodes, it was, you know, she asked you, you know, it's an at-home yoga practice. So I just practiced right over there in front of my television, to find your purpose for doing this, you know, whether it's to tone, whether it's to lose weight, whether it's to feel more flexible. And mine was to get in touch with my inner sense of self, whatever that was. You know, I wasn't, because I was still questioning at that point when I started. Whatever that was, whoever that was, whatever gender that may be, get in touch with my inner sense of self and just let that self come out, let it flow free. And to be able to just have that yoga mat be my place where I can just be myself every morning, or in the evenings if I couldn't do it in the morning, and just let my mind wander and roam free and just, you know, come back to, you know, stay grounded for 30 minutes every day or every other day was very, very impactful for, I think I would say, calmly. I don't know. Maybe it didn't seem calm at the time, but looking back, it seemed very gradual in how I just approached everything in discovering and coming to terms with my own identity. So long answer just to say yoga and running, but they were very impactful in very different ways.
Oh, I think that's amazing. I mean, you bring up such a good point that creating a space where you can just be yourself, a safe space that you can, whether it's a yoga mat or, a gym or running on the street or, just sitting on your couch with a book and relaxing, finding a way to connect to your body and your mind in a place where you don't feel judged, I think makes a huge difference. I remember when I first started working out, I started lifting weights with a really good friend of mine, one of my very best friends. He was one of the very first people that I ever came out to, and he had a home gym. So we would go after work every day to his house and we would work out. And it was just such a safe space for me to explore my masculinity, to be with another man who I loved and who is my friend and who understood in his own way what I was going through, but to be able to have that space to explore and to connect with my body in a very physical sense also while doing that really changed the path of my transition and just my life in general, the overall connection and sanity that we're able to keep while we're just living life. I mean, I think that's really what self-care can be about. I know that Samantha probably wants to talk to our next question. Samantha?
I'm actually over here just like thinking like, wow, I really need to do a better job of working out in general. I used to work out quite a bit earlier in transition, and then I sort of hit the wall with a whole bunch of surgeries in a row, and I had long recoveries in there. I'm not making excuses, but I remember how I felt after I worked out, and just hearing you both talk about that, it's like, oh man, I need to get back out there. I need to put that time into that. So you're both inspiring me to go do a better job of taking care of myself, because not only does that, we're finally ourselves, right? We finally get to live the life we want to live. The idea is to be around as long as possible, to enjoy this as long as possible. So health is a huge part of that. So I'm kicking myself now. It's like, all right, I gotta get back into it and work out. But I'll get into the next question here. I'm glad you brought up yoga, because that's something that we can do not only in a studio but at home, like you've been doing. And I think it's important to identify things that we can do at home, especially earlier in transition where maybe you can't go out as much as yourself. Or if you're like me and you have children, you just aren't able to get out that much anyway. So I'm kind of curious around the house, around the kitchen, what else do you do, Erica, to build yourself up when you're at home?
I definitely have a passion for cooking. Well, just to touch before about how you feel bad about all the working out stories. You'll notice most of my stories were about a year and a half ago, so I have some work to do myself at this point in my life, but it does feel good to talk about prior accomplishments in general. So I was on a good string of getting back in yoga. I was trying to do 30 days straight. I threw out my back doing something. I don't know. I'm not even 30 years old yet, so I don't know what happened, but I'll get back into it. Anyway, moving on to your next question. You mentioned the kitchen. I love to cook. And when I bought my house about 4 years ago, almost, I think it was within the next year, I had built a raised bed garden in my backyard. And those are two things that really, really helped to calm me and keep me grounded. Every morning I would go out and water the garden, especially during hot days, it needed a lot of water. And to be able to grow food from that garden, like cucumbers and tomatoes. I would make pickles with the cucumbers. I would make my a sauce recipe with the tomatoes. Weirdly enough, I don't think I like to eat those two fruits or vegetables raw. I like to cook with them, but besides the point, I did enjoy cooking very much, and it's nice to be able to control that part of your life and really feel good about what you're putting into your body. And when I was feeling rough, having rough days, I would just find something nice and healthy to make. At some point at the end of last year, I think it was October of 2018, I had done, which now seems so far long ago, but I had tried Whole30 with a couple of girlfriends. And I won't get into the very specific details, but it's an elimination-based diet. And you get rid of a lot of things, primarily processed foods, sugars, alcohols. There are other things, like grains, dairy. It sounds extremely restrictive, and it is, but when you have such of a restrictive diet, it allows you to just focus on fruits, veggies, unprocessed meats. And it honestly made shopping extremely easy. So without really doing very much working out at all, I was able to lose about 5 or 6 pounds in a month. Not like I was trying to, it was just a byproduct of trying to eat healthier and eat cleaner. And through that program, I was able to rediscover a love for cooking, which helped bring me out of a rut that I was in at the end of last year. It was around when, I think at that point in my life, I had realized that I was ready to, and I had posted about this on Instagram, but for those who hadn't seen that post or that blog post, I'd reached a point in my life where I realized I was ready to move on with certain surgeries in my life. And, the waiting list for those surgeries, even the consultations alone, can be extremely long. So I was starting to get very down on myself, starting to, again, worry about things I couldn't control, like that waiting period. And rediscovering my passion for cooking and getting back into that helped me get out of that rut. And it's just truly remarkable how something as simple as that can help your mental state.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad you said that you're a gardener, because I also enjoy gardening, and that's definitely a way that I like to relax when I'm at home. And what's nice is I get to garden with my kids too, and teach them. I've always gardened since I was little, and it's still soothing. It's still enjoyable to do that. But those hobbies, right? Those are the things we don't want to lose in transition. Something that I always hear people say is, well, my external self may change in transition, but I'm still the same on the inside. Transitioning isn't a reason to stop doing what you loved doing before. It may be an opportunity to explore other things that you haven't had a chance to do before. But if you have those hobbies that you really do enjoy, stick with them. Don't let them fall to the wayside, because they do provide a nice break from worrying about transition. I know for me, gardening is a big one. Raising my kids is more than enough to keep me busy and active. Having 4 boys here and having a chance to really become an engaged parent. Transitioning kind of allowed me more opportunity to be available for them. Having a chance to get rid of some of that dysphoria that was just weighing me down so heavily allowed me to be more available. And that's been an exciting part of my transition as well, as being there for my kids. But I also hike. I'm also really into computer programming and projects like that. And those are all really important tools when I'm having a bad day, or I'm getting down on myself about something, that I can lean on those, or I can do a puzzle with my kids, or play some Super Smash Brothers on Nintendo. And, in those moments, you're not just consumed with some of those feelings, especially when, they will come up during transition.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely agree with you in that. You mentioned you may find new hobbies or new interests, or, new parts about you will come to the surface now that you're able to be yourself. But I found that the old things that I used to love doing, I still very much enjoy doing. I used to love to golf. I still do. Gardening, cooking. Video games is a big one. It's a big stress reliever. I love board games too. I'm a huge board game nerd. So it's just, I call myself a serial hobbyist, just because at one point I would say a lot of these things used to be distractions from whatever I was dealing with in my mind. But now that I feel like I've transitioned, it's just, I'm able to focus on what I enjoy doing, what my passions are. Journaling and blogging, I think, being my number one newest passion, which we touched on before. But a lot of these things that are very, key in my life, I used to turn to as distractions, and now through transitioning, they just feel like they're ways to let myself out, kind of, in a way. So it's interesting, the shift in perspective, how, these things are.
And I'm curious what Thomas, you've done with your hobbies during transition as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you both bring up such a good point that transition isn't about becoming some new person. It's about becoming more of the person you are, that you really truly are. So getting to tap into your hobbies at a whole new level of who you are on the inside and bringing that into that hobby, I think is just so fun. I mean, one of my biggest hobbies would be writing. It definitely gets expressed daily through my Instagram page, but I also have been writing a lot of poetry lately, which has been really fun for me. And that's almost a new hobby, but I wonder if I've maybe been kind of doing a little bit of poetry most of my life and never really knowing it. But Sam and I, we love exploring, going on hikes, going into the city. We love to eat, so we mostly travel around, like going to new restaurants and trying new places and seeing what we like and don't like. And we do a lot of cooking. We cook a lot at home. And I think Netflix counts as a hobby. And if so, then we do quite a lot of it. And we're very good at it. Us and our cats, we watch a lot of Netflix. It's very therapeutic to me. So I love that.
And I think part of self-care is letting yourself have those indulgences, whatever they may be, not knocking yourself down saying, oh, I shouldn't have watched that extra episode or those extra 5 episodes, let's say, if you're me. But it's just, you don't want to like get tied down into those for too long, but forgiving yourself kind of, and, letting yourself go with having those indulgences on occasion, I think is also very healthy. To allow yourself to have that. So.
No, I was going to say, Thomas, because you brought up going out with Sam, going out in general is another great tool when you're having a tough day, and whether that's going out with a significant other or going out with a group of friends, that gives you an opportunity to sort of break up the day as well. And I know it's not always possible to go out, but I know for me with Laura, when we get those date nights, that's important for us to reconnect as well. And that's, reconnecting as a couple and not just, worrying about what's happening during transition this week or anything like that. So I know that when I was really in the meat of my transition, we really tried to make sure to have those date nights for the two of us so that we still had that one-on-one time outside of transition to work on our relationship. And in addition to that, having friendships, whether online or in person, and being able to talk with those people is also another great tool to use in transition. If you make friends with other people who are in the process or have transitioned, there is a lot of benefit in working through some of those tougher days with them. And I've found so many people out there that are just so willing to talk with me on those tough days. And hopefully, if you're in transition, or if you're considering transition, you are building that network of people that you can turn to. And if you haven't started that yet, it's something you really need to look at, because you can transition in a vacuum, but it is a very dark road. Having other people who are in the same place as you, or who are maybe slightly ahead of you in transition, those are the individuals that are going to weigh through this process. And I think it's such a critical part of transitioning.
Definitely. I mean, friendships are so key. I wouldn't be anywhere if it weren't for my friends. I mean, the people that surround me in my daily life, who were my rocks when I first came out, but also my online friends. I mean, my online friends are like so great. And to be able, so I didn't know any other transgender person when I came out and when I was going through this, like in my real life. So the only people that I could really connect with who knew in their own way, through their own transition, what I was going through, were people online. And making those connections and having those friends, I mean, they're some of the best friends I have in this world, and we talk all the time, every day. So it's so important to have those relationships to draw upon and to surround yourself with, you know.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it was shortly in like the early stages of my transition, the end of 2017, beginning of 2018, where I felt like my life obviously was going in a very different direction, and I was, losing like track and losing touch of, a lot of the routine and the normalcy of my life at that time. And I won't go into specifics about what was going on or who the affected people were, but basically I was in a time in my life where I really needed to I just felt it in myself that I needed to connect with other people, whether it was connecting with my work friends or meeting, new people through like the various hobbies I did. I'm on a kickball intramural team, so I met people there. I'm on, I love board games, as I mentioned, so I met friends through that. I just scoured all these different activities, and tried to find people, and I poured myself into those friendships because that's just what I do. And, like how I got through that time in my life was having others, like having that support network. And it was so incredibly important to be able to have people to go to. But like you said, Thomas, not most, I would say I was like the only trans person, at least out trans person that I knew of in all of my circles of friends and all of my groups. And despite having all of those people to go to, it still felt alone to a degree, being the only one who's like you or thinks like you, at least, outwardly so. Um, so, connecting with those people online was incredibly life-changing. It was just so good to turn to people online, to share what I was going through, to have that support online. And, to be able to, like you said, some people like I'll talk to every day. And, even as early as like, I think I started really sharing on a consistent basis last August, I want to say, maybe July. And just the relationships and the connections I have, like I remember it just being a few people. And now, whether due to me following more people or more people following me, just to have those connections, it's sometimes overwhelming, but it's incredible to have that overwhelming positivity in your life. And, recently I was able to make one of my online Reddit Instagram friends, a friend in real life. And that's, Megan Bound, if you guys follow her as well. So it's just, that was also really incredible to just change the dynamic of that relationship and that friendship. It just so happened we, happen to live like 30 minutes away from each other. So that's just been, I think, very good. I don't want to speak for her, but I think I will. And I would think she would agree. It's been very good for both of us, just to have that level of care for one another. And it's scary to reach out to people like that. It's kind of scary to like make that comment. I think, Paula Nolan had wrote about this today. It's scary to reach out, make that comment, write that message to someone, to go to that meetup, to do that thing, whatever you're thinking of doing, that's scary. But by putting yourself out there, you're allowing yourself, you're exposing yourself to different vulnerabilities, and, it can help you in the long run. So yeah, there's the picture of us too. So we've recently started, hanging out more, and it's just been really great for both of us. And by making that first outreach, that's what allowed for something like that to happen.
Yeah, I think you're so right. Making online friends into real life friends is the best thing in the whole wide world. It's so rewarding. It always pays off. I totally relate to the anxiety of like the first meetup and like, oh, like, we're actually going to do this, like, okay, like, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? And then really following through with that and making it happen, that it always pays off. And I know that on some of my worst days with my dysphoria and my body, having those friends to fall back on who really understand that can be so changing to the situation and how I see it. But I'm wondering, Erica, how do you, or what are some strategies that you work through when you're fighting dysphoria on some of your worst days? What are some of your go-tos that you like to try to get past those hard times?
I would say, especially early transition, it was working on my makeup. Probably, I think when I started, like once I went full time, which was early 2018. Once I went full time, I'm pretty sure I did my makeup for at least 200 days straight. And it's not that I counted, tacking every single day. I just knew when I started. I knew I never skipped a day. And then I realized one time in August that I had not done my makeup that day. And I was blown away. And other things I would do, that's me at Pride in New York. So connecting with other trans people was one. Going to support groups, which I've recently started going back to the one that I started going to maybe 2 years ago. Whether it's dysphoria, like you asked about, or just really any kind of grief that I'm dealing with respects to my transition, having those other trans people to connect to, because it's great having the friends I do in my life. I wouldn't trade them for the world, but on some level you need those trans connections and those trans friends, because they can truly relate and truly understand what you're going through. So whether it's support groups, going to Pride events, I went to the Trans Wellness Conference, I guess 2017 and 2018, and go in 2019. So hopefully I'll see you there, Samantha, and others who plan on attending. So that's me.
I'll be there.
Yeah, great. I can't wait to meet you guys. So there's a number of things, but I would say you asked specifically about dysphoria, and I would say doing my makeup, even on a day where I don't plan on doing anything, where I have no plans at all, just sitting down in front of the mirror, spending, half hour, 45 minutes if I want to try some other techniques, that was incredibly important. I think that was a picture of my vanity when I first set it up. So that was actually one of the items as I was reading back in my self journal, one of the items was set up. I think I said makeup battle station, because that's what a lot of people on makeup addiction on Reddit tend to call it. So I went to IKEA. I got that vanity table. I got the lights around it from Amazon, and they just, adhere to it. It didn't come with the table. And I really went all out, and I made that my zone. And I'm not sure if you can see the full picture, the full wording in the I guess picture above my vanity, but I had posted about that recently on my Instagram page as well. And it just talks about living your life with intention, the life you've always dreamed of living, So every day when I went to do my makeup, I would see that positive affirmation of what I was doing in my life right above my head. And it was very affirming, as I've mentioned. It was calming, it was grounding. And one step I never made sure I forgot was doing my blush as well, because you have to smile to get it on the apples of your cheeks. And I'm just so obnoxiously positive, but I love doing blush because it just forces you to smile. And, it's nice even when you're having a crappy day.
Now, what I want to know is, does your vanity always look that clean?
No. No. That was as soon as I set it up, and I never took another picture of it again. So.
I'd be too afraid to even share a picture of how mine looks in any given day. It's a disaster,
I knew myself once it was set up. I wanted to take a picture.
Dysphoria, my worst dysphoria days, and we talked about it earlier. And having that network of people who have been through this, having that network of other trans individuals has been so important for me when dealing with those really bad dysphoria days. So I literally have people on speed dial. If I feel a bad day coming on, I've got, either direct message in Instagram or Facebook Messenger. I've got my people that, I know I can turn to help me work through some of those thoughts. Because for me, the dysphoric day is never, I don't want someone just to, say that I'm wrong. I just want to talk through it. Right. And the best way for me to beat those dysphoric days is to sort of break it down into the smallest pieces possible, right? Try to figure out what brought that on in the first place, and being able to talk through that with somebody else, and hopefully somebody else who's experienced similar feelings, usually is beneficial to me. Every once in a while, there are just those really rough days that, you sort of have to take the loss on, but I've found that by leaning on my social networks, I can usually get ahead of it before it turns into something bigger than it has to be.
Yeah, I think That's so true. I connect with like the people first aspect of dysphoria, sort of like reaching out to my main contacts first. And I mean, Erica, you talking about your vanity honestly reminded me of how on some of the days that I would have some of the worst dysphoria, I remember getting in front of my mirror. Now, I wasn't doing my makeup, but I would just stand there and I would look at myself and I would like give myself a pep talk. And it sounds really cheesy, but I like to talk a lot and I just get all in my head. But I would just be like, you can do this. Like, you're going to be great. And like, you're going to wear this shirt and it's going to look awesome. And like, even if it's not perfect, and I would just go on and like tell myself all these things that maybe even at the time I'm not sure if I fully believed, but just being there and like there's something about the mirror and physically looking at myself and having that conversation, it was just always really impactful, and it always kind of didn't fully solve anything, but there was something in that always made it a little easier moving forward.
I definitely remember doing something like that. Oh.
I want to head over and make sure we're getting to our viewer questions here tonight. So let's go ahead and pull up the first viewer question that we had submitted. All right. Do you ever worry that too much euphoria can set us up for a big dysphoric crash later? Erica, thoughts on that?
Okay, yeah, I was nodding my head as that question came up. It's weird how I feel like happened. And when you mentioned before about, when you start to feel dysphoric and you break it down into those little pieces and try and see what triggered that, what set that up. Over the past couple of years, as I've been going through these roller coasters of, let's say, euphoria and then dysphoria and back again, I feel like over the time, the dysphoria is minimized, the euphoria is increased, but you still notice those little bouts of dysphoria, even still. So I would say yes to that question, that I remember, very large, highs from that gender euphoria. And then maybe whether it was a couple days later or a week later or whenever, maybe it was even 30 minutes later where I started doubting myself and how I was reacting to that situation. I do feel like there was that dysphoric crash later. So if the person asking that question was doing so because they feel that, you are not alone. I absolutely feel that too. And I think what's helped me most to get through that is just taking that step back and recognizing that happens, and that it's all just this roller coaster cycle. But, there's the ups and downs. But like if you look at the overall trend, it's just increasing over time. And paying attention to what those triggers are in dysphoria, I think helps to make dysphoria matter less, because you're able to target specifically what's going wrong.
Thomas, your take on it?
I think it's a really interesting question, and I totally understand what Erica was describing there, especially early on in my transition. I remember feeling almost like scared to feel good about anything. Like, I was so always not feeling good that I just had this fear that if I only knew how to live in the bad. So like if the good came, would that just make, going back to the badness harder? I remember thinking that, and honestly not even really knowing how to express that was how I was feeling, but just knowing deep down that I had that fear of like, if I allow myself to enjoy this newness or something new, that, if things don't work out, or if, surgery doesn't come when I want it to, which was something that I needed, or, if changes from hormones don't happen the way that I hope they will, then I'll just get so disappointed that I won't be able to handle it. And I remember thinking that so often, and really somewhere along the way, and I can't fully pinpoint it, but my mindset really started to change. And maybe it was kind of progressively picking up the changes and progressively coming out to more and more people and just really kind of fully externally living my life as my gender. But eventually somewhere along the way, I really dropped that fear and really leaned into the dysphoria, or to the euphoria. There's so many phorias going on here. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I every week on Friday, I have Gender Euphoria Friday. So I always try to talk about something that week that has been making me feel connected to my euphoria. And in starting that sort of very routine process of digging into my euphoria has really changed my perspective on my transition as a whole. And it's really made me embrace my euphoria and lean into it all the time and get as much of it as I can have. And that makes moments of dysphoria, it makes them have a different perspective. It makes me see them for what they are, which are kind of, these instances that are beyond my control, and that I know that eventually they're going to subside one way or the other. And it's really reframed my whole life around dysphoria and euphoria.
One thing I want to share from my story is when I was like in the thick of transition early on, lots of things are happening at once. Change is happening quickly. You're coming out, you're working on your presentation, and it's just sort of this rush, right? There's just all of this change happening. You're just moving. But there does come a point where everything gets normal again in your life, and you have to figure out like how to step back into that normal routine. And I think that was a little harder for me than I thought it was going to be. I didn't realize how much I had wrapped up in the actual process of transitioning, that once I finally got to the point where the majority of the work was done, now I had all this extra time, like, well, I don't have to worry about this anymore. What should I be doing? And some of those extra thought cycles led to negative thoughts as well, and worries and concerns. So I had to really work to make sure that I wasn't deriving my euphoria just from transition, right? I had to look inward to my life, to my family, to Laura, to my children, to my friends, and to myself, right? The things that made me happy, to rebalance after transition. I think it's really easy to fall into that type of cycle where everything that you do is related to transition. And that's sort of the game plan, right? I mean, it is just a very intense process, but at some point, the amount of brain power it takes to focus on transition is going to drop. I don't know if it ever goes away, but it's going to be less of what you're dealing with on a daily basis and more of what you are dealing with in the background. And you have to be prepared for that. And being prepared for that and making sure that you are whole as a person, you still have hobbies, you still have things you like to do, that is going to make that transition into a more regular type day easier in the long run. So that's the thing I really implore people to do earlier on than later. It's something I wish I would have started sooner in my transition than waiting. I mean, it was about a year in where it really hit me that, oh my gosh, I had put so much into this that I was really sort of losing sight of myself. And it took a while to get that back. And I worked closely with my therapist to close some of those gaps and concerns that I had in my life. All right, I think we have one more question loaded up here. What tips do you have to disconnect from the outside world and relax? And we'll start with Erica.
I particularly love disconnecting from the outside world and relaxing. I've spoke about yoga a lot before. That's one great way to do it. I just, sit down in my living room. Like, I don't really do yoga in a studio. So for me personally, with a home practice, I think that's a great way to do it. Other ways, I love video games. So personally, that's just a great way to tune things out. But strictly, like, if I were to just spend time with myself, I would love to get into meditation, not like I do that often. So primary ones, yoga, video games, cooking is a great way. I like to try and look up new recipes every week and try something different. I obviously still have my go-tos, but that's been incredibly helpful for me. And to be able to grow my own food in my backyard in a city, which is even, I think, I'll pat myself on the back for a second. I think it's, pretty impressive to be able to do that. But those are some some easy ways I like to just disconnect, relax, and unwind.
Yeah, I know for me, I'm really into hiking and camping and sort of getting out there into the open. I'm out here in Arizona. There's lots of open spaces. Laura and I both like to do those things. So if I want to get away, then literally getting away is a great way of doing it. And it has the added bonus that oftentimes there's not a cell phone signal out there, so I can't be on the phone the entire time either. And speaking of the phone, for as helpful as a lot of these online tools are for people going through transition, it's okay to disconnect every once in a while. It'll still be there when you come back. There's, no obligation you have to be on there any more than you're capable of being on there. Those mental health breaks from online or social media, take them. There's no point in burning yourself out on those mediums. If you're in a position where you're starting to feel like it's doing more harm than good, take that break and come back when you're ready. I think it's important that we are aware of that, and that, we're not just compelled to just be on there every second of the day. And I guess I should take my own advice sometime.
Yes, so true, so true. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was just laughing along with Samantha, agreeing about all the phone usage for sure.
I was just going to say that I feel like sometimes I get in the mindset of feeling like I have to post every day. And I know that there are people that would probably love if I did post every day, but sometimes I just, as Sam just said, if I don't want to force anything, and I don't want to force positivity or any of that. And I know I do talk about some of the negative things that happen too, but I think it's just good sometimes to disconnect. So if there's ever particularly silent periods, it's specifically that, just disconnecting, not really going on Instagram for a couple days, and or Reddit, or you name it, any form of social media. It's just been really healthy to just disconnect when you need it. So I think that was some amazing advice, Samantha. Absolutely.
Well, we covered a lot here tonight. We covered so many different topics and tools we can use through transition here. I hope that we've really helped some people out there who are struggling in their own journeys, put it in perspective a little bit. And hopefully the three of us sharing our journeys here can help those who are looking at, how can I take better care of myself through this process? So, Erica, I do want to say thank you from everyone here at the show for joining us here tonight. This has been a really great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
I know. This is so much fun. And look at us. Thomas is surrounded by curls tonight. So there you go, Thomas.
I'm the luckiest man. Luckiest man alive.
So I just checked with Addison. We didn't have any questions in the YouTube chat. So we're going to wrap things up here and start talking about next week's episode. So next week on the show, we're going to be joined by Jo Cotty. She's actually an amazing individual I first learned about on Reddit when a timeline she posted hit the front page. And she's had an incredible life, an incredible career. We're going to talk to her about her career as a teacher and her current work advocating for the transgender community.
Jo will also share her experiences as someone who transitioned after retirement, and as a transition into adulthood is a topic that we are all often asked about. It's going to be a wonderful conversation, and we hope that have you tune in for it live at our regular time a week from tonight.
All right, we'll bring everyone back on here. Addison and Victoria, thank you so much for your help in the control room there tonight. Appreciate having your support back there. Erica, wonderful having you on the show with us tonight. This was a really great conversation. I'm so glad we had the chance to finally sit down and talk for more than a few minutes.
I agree. Thank you again for having me. And congrats on all your success with the show. It's truly amazing.
Thank you so much. Thomas, congrats on your first episode. Hey, you got it under your belt. It's all downhill from here.
So
This is
happy
a
to be here.
wonderful chat here tonight. So glad that everyone was able to tune in and join us here tonight. Please join us next week for another episode of Trans IRL. Good night, everybody.